So this hopeless situation ends with the first stanza. Then the poet starts being hopeful. So you can see that the poem is escalating between despair and hope. The poet starts desperate and hopeless, and then he will have hope of doing something, hope of optimism. He's being optimistic in these lines. With thee, thee here refers to God. Oh, let me rise. Let me go up again. Let me get rid of my burdens, of my sins, of my despair and hopelessness. As larks harmoniously and sing this day thy victories. As lark, just like a lark, because the lark is very light and it could move so fast and it sometimes sinks. So as larks harmoniously and sing this day thy victories. And then at this day I sing the blessings and the bounties that were granted by God to humans. Now you see that the speaker is more um, optimistic here than earlier. So the speaker is still having the heart to heart with God at this line, line 6, with thee. But now he himself enters the poem and we start getting the pronouns me. So before we start, we talked about he, some third person pronouns. But now if you consider these words like, oh, let me, as larks harmon and sing this day thy victories, then shall the fall feather the flights in me. So we are having some me pronoun that refers to the poet himself. So the speaker starts entering the poem and speaking himself because of the pronouns. We also get a new tense. Previously, you see the words lost, created, and he became. But here in the next stanza, we are talking about a present tense, and the poet expresses his own case. Adam and his long ago problems, as you see, are narrated in the past tense, but now we have the present one by which the speaker is talking about himself, showing his hope and his optimism about the future. Adam might have ended up in a rougher place where we can see most poor. He became very poor, but the speaker um, is determined to ask for something better, is determined to achieve something better than what Adam had at the end of the first stanza. This also where Easter enters the poem for the first time. If you look at the speaker, um, when he wants to rise with thee here, as we said, refers to God, and sing this day thy victories, and shall the fall further the flights in me. The speaker here, if you notice, just asked God to let him rise again, and just like a lark, um, starts singing, starts emitting music. Here he wants to be permitted to sing his worship, sing his vigils, sing his duties that he is entitled to, in order in order to do something required by him to God, the duties that man should do towards God, among which is worshiping in particular, and these refers to the victories um, of man towards God. So these things that man should do will do what? Will push that kind of bird, that kind of a human which wanted to be like a bird, and push him forward, push him up, make him aspire to higher things. So here, the stanza ends with some hope. If we move to the next stanza, my tender age in sorrow did begin, and distilled with sickness and shame. Now we go back to Adam. How did he start start his age, my tender age, my youth age, my young age, it started in sorrow. Now we go back to the past tense. And distilled with sickness and shame, and became sick and became ashamed because of his descent from heaven to earth. Thou didst so punish sin. And this is the by this descent, by the sickness, by the shame, by pushing Adam out of heaven, God has punished sin, the sin that Adam has committed. Thou didst so punish sin that I became more sin because of the sin, because of the offenses that man did. Man becomes very thin. Thin means very weak. I'd like to trigger your memory with every man. You dealt with this poem earlier last year. How did every man become when he became a sinner, when he started committing many sins? He became very thin and he could not raise himself. So he used good deeds and other friends in order to strengthen his body and meet death. The same is present here. Man is very thin because of his sins, because of his offenses towards God. And if you look, man is very weak now. And again, the form of the poem, the length of the lines corresponds with the content, with the meaning. So, because of his sins, now man is very thin. This is similar to the first stanza. With thee, let me combine. Again, the speaker returns to the poem and enters here. With thee, let me combine. Let me be one. It is related here, it's related to some Sufism, if you have heard of this word, Sufism, Sophia, or mysticism, where mystic people believe that when they reach certain level of religion, they look for some combination with God, some kind of man and God become one solid mass, and man becomes just like a holy thing. So here the speaker looks for this kind of um, for this kind of idea. With thee let me combine, in order to be one with God, in order to be absolved and purified from these sins, and feel thy victory, and feel thy existence, thy thy worshiping, thy the deities that I should do towards God. Because if I imp my wing on thine, imp here is referred to kind of a hawk, sucker. It is a kind of a verb that is used in the 18th and 19th centuries. So when the feather of one of the hawk, of a kind of the bird, the tamed bird, when these feathers are broken, and they fix them by binding them into another feather. So this kind of verb or this kind of action is called imp. So, in order to highlight the mixture that the poet wants to achieve with God, he wanted to imp, to stick the wing of the man, of the person, with the wings of God, and make it one solid wing, one single piece. If I imp my wing on thine, so he dreams of combining himself, of attaching himself to God. If I imp my wing on thine, affliction shall advance the flight in me. Afflictions, the suffering, the troubles, the punishment will push, will progress, will develop that kind of a flight and push the speaker forward and absolve him from the sins that he acquired or he got previously. So again, the poem ends with a sign of hope. The speaker in the last stanza explains his meaning more clearly, especially in for if I imp my wings on thine. Um, if you keep pet hawks, I'm quoting from certain source. If you keep pet يعني حيوان أليف hawks الصقر. Actually, this is done in the 17th century at the time of the poet. You might note that it is a technical term meaning to repair a damaged feather. So the verb imp means to repair a damaged feather by attaching part of a new feather, by connecting it with a new feather. This implies the verb imp. So, in the last line, in line 20, the poet reaches a similar conclusion to line 10 in the previous stanza or in the first stanza. Just as Adam's fall increased the distance of his flight in the first stanza, now the affliction of the poet, his sin, his suffering, and God's punishment lengthens his flight and advances him, which means increases and powers him, robust, or boost his own his flight and push him forward. This is the content of the next stanza. Generally speaking, the poem is evokes some religious perspective. The poet, as if because he is a priest and orator, he is asking people to drop sins, not to commit any sins, and if they do, they need to return back to God, as he is doing. And he is alluding to the sin of Adam. When Adam has committed the sin, he became very thin. When he purified himself and he went back to God and asked for forgiveness, now he became he took a better shape by what? By singing this day thy victory, by getting back to the victories, which are the duties that we do, and the vigils and the let's say the the worshipping that we do towards God. The same process is repeated here. So the poet is as if moralizing people, asking them not to do sins, and if they do, they need to get back to God, to imp, to connect, to attach themselves to God in order to be freed from any kind of suffering or sins. This is the most important thing we need in this poem. Thank you.